inspiring Uganda.
Good evening and welcome to Behind the Headlines. This last day of July, my name is Timothy Nyangweso. As the electoral process begins to pick steam in this country, the Electoral Commission has decided to pick up some milestones there. Yesterday, they came out to start the process of demarcating some of the polling stations. Some will be renamed, others will be shifted, but also others will be merged. But as this country gets closer to this polling, we look at about 3.3 million leaders come 2026. We also look at 40,000 polling stations come 2026. The biggest questions are electoral reforms, constitutional reforms. Where does the trajectory of this country lead us to? What does that mean for us come 2026? With about 16 months to the nominations and the campaign starting there, what does the future of Uganda look like and the leaders we look for come the issues of all Ugandans? That's the discussion tonight, and that's what we'll be looking at here tonight on Behind the Headlines. You can be part of the show. Go to our YouTube channel, let us know what you think, or go to our X platform, drop your comment, hashtag UBC Behind the Headlines, or the number 0709 60 25 92. Let me get to the panel. On my immediate left, Dr. Sarah Berete, the Executive Director for Center for Constitutional Governance. She's here with us. Good evening, Doctor.
Good evening, Timothy and viewers, and I'm glad to be back on the show.
Thank you for coming through, and we appreciate that you came in on the last minute there. Hosting her for the first time here and meeting.
Standby generator.
I knew that was about to come, either from you or Captain Babu. Hosting her for the first time here, Charity Ahimsebwe, Executive Director of Electoral Laws and Governance Institute. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
It's good to have you, and thank you for honoring our invite.
Thank you.
Next to Charity is Honorable Medad Lubega Segona, Member of Parliament representing the people of Busiro East and a member of the National Unity Platform. Good evening, sir.
A very good evening to you, to the panelists, and to the viewers out there.
Next to Honorable Segona is Honorable Flight Captain Edward Babu, who is with us this evening and a senior citizen. Good evening, sir.
Thank you very much for inviting me to sit in these members of the Law Society.
Mm-hmm.
You join.
So I am privileged, and I thank you very much for having me, and of course also to make them more happier. Their mate in America seems to be doing very well. She's an attorney general, a former prosecutor, a former attorney general in California, a former member of the Senate, and a former, she's still the vice president. Wonderful. And she's a lawyer too. So you can see the Law Society is doing very well.
And also another standby generator there.
And I'm Captain a standby generator because I was invited. Actually, the man who was coming here was he also a lawyer?
No,
okay.
A journalist.
So I'd like to thank you very much, and thank you very much for bringing me to sit with the minister who talks about law, constitution and all that. Thank you very much.
Lastly but not least, Honorable Norbert Mao, Minister in charge of Justice and Constitutional Affairs, but also the President General of the Democratic Party. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Good evening, viewers. Thank you, Timothy. I haven't been here in a long time. I'm happy to be back.
I bring you greetings from Gulu. I was there last weekend, so good rains up there and things going well.
We are two here who are from there. Even Chegona.
Yeah, from Apa, which is all that up to Joka.
Chegona is also one of us.
Yeah.
Did you move around very well? They know him very well in Gulu. He was the chairman there.
Yes. His wedding was in the backyard of what is the Hotel Boma. When I was there, his wedding was right at the back.
I was really pleased that nobody turned up. That's all right. That's what happens during weddings.
Before we even get into this conversation, we would like to congratulate the 31st coronation anniversary of His Majesty Ronald Muwenda Mutebi II. Today, he makes 31 years. That's why you see the Honorable Segona dressed to elegance to represent that today. And we congratulate His Majesty, and may you see long life in this season. God bless you. Let's get into this conversation, and I'll start with the Honorable
At that point
Nobat.
you do this.
You know, when we talk about electoral reforms, then we also do that. It's a little bit careful.
No,
as
he
we
has
go.
been localized and fairly subdued.
Actually, he speaks the language better than the owners.
I will leave it at that and pick up the conversation. So yesterday, the Electoral Commission launched the second part of it, demarcating electoral polling stations there, and they say it will start in August. And they're looking at 3 major areas: shifting, merging, but also renaming some of the polling stations there. And it's befitting that I start with you, Honorable Mao. Honorable Minister, when we look at some of the things that you said in your inaugural statement, you said there were constitutional reforms at your desk when you arrived, the Supreme Court recommendations that were at your desk, the 2015 Citizen Compact that you were part of. How far with the constitutional reforms, and also how far with the Uganda Law Reform Commission that you suggested?
When I came into office, I requested for the file for the Constitutional Review Commission. They brought me a big fat file which had a cabinet paper which had been prepared by my predecessor, the Honorable General Kahindo Tafire. It proposed the setting up of a Constitutional Review Commission. It even had proposed names and terms of reference. You do recall that one of our biggest complaints has been piecemeal changes to the Constitution. So, members of Parliament have been pushing a lot of proposed amendments on the floor. And even before I joined the cabinet, the government was always giving one answer: hold your fire, we are coming up with a comprehensive rack of constitutional reforms. So it is not my entry into the cabinet that sparked this discussion about comprehensive reforms of the Constitution. I got in there and we drew a proposal for money. So 2023-2024 budget, the Parliament did not give us any money. Now the same Parliament says, when are you establishing the Constitutional Review Commission? But there are creative ways of doing things. We have in Uganda a body known as the Uganda Law Reform Commission. So I met with them and I asked them to compile all the proposals for constitutional amendments. I can tell you, Timothy, that 90% of the proposals are known. There is no need for anyone to run around the country rummaging for proposals to reform our constitution. And the issues that keep Ugandans awake are also known. That work is ongoing and will soon be finished. My job will then be to ask the same Law Reform Commission to carry some consultations across the country. And then the cabinet will receive those proposals, and whatever they agree on will be forwarded to Parliament. That is in terms of the process. In terms of the substance, I believe we shall debate it. In other words, the content. But I can tell you the sources of those proposals. Number one is the Supreme Court. In fact, I, as Minister for Justice and Constitutional Affairs, I have to admit that government is in contempt of court.
Exactly.
as of now.
Exactly.
We are actually in contempt of court, and it's extremely embarrassing and disrespectful, and I think we ought to speed up. The second source is the group known as the civil society. There was a campaign for free and fair elections. So they came up with something known as a compact, national compact on free and fair elections. And by the way, free and fair elections is a constitutional right. The Constitution of Uganda promises Ugandans a free and fair election. So the Citizens Compact is a comprehensive rack of proposals. Some of them may not be acceptable to the government, but that is the starting point of debate. Number 3 is the amendments being proposed by political parties. All political parties have come up with proposals for constitutional amendments. So what remains now is for me to work with my shoestring budget and let the matters go to the cabinet. That is my job. So that's a little bit of the process and a little bit of the substance. It is important that government should prioritize constitutional reforms. Right now, it may not be the top priority. We believe very strongly that each time members of the backbench come up with constitutional amendment proposals and the government says, no, wait, we are going to come up with our amendments, and then we don't act, then we are both in contempt of the Supreme Court and also in contempt of Parliament, because the parliamentarians are getting agitated. So I am very much with those who are demanding rapid action. But the problem from my side has been, number one, I sensed that it may not be the most urgent thing, even in the mind of the President of the Republic of Uganda, the issue of constitutional reforms. Each president has their priorities. So we have got to mount pressure. Citizens have got to continue insisting and demanding. You know, supply follows demand. And then the other thing is money. Ugandans want to be part of the constitutional review process. And the constitution has got to be reviewed so that it is in line with the demands of the citizens. So that is the state of affairs from where I sit. As minister, I gave an assignment to those who are best placed to do the detailed work. Then I'll hand it over to the cabinet. It becomes the property of cabinet. And I believe we will end up in Parliament.
Honorable Mao, what timelines are we looking at here, and will it be able to see the time frame of 2026, or we're flogging a dead horse?
Where there is a will, there is a way. I've already told you that everything depends on priorities. You saw when Uganda was elected to lead the non-aligned movement and the G77 plus China. Construction works were done very fast. In a matter of weeks, Kampala was lit up. Flowers were planted. Munyonyo was rebuilt. So we need a sense of urgency. And that sense of urgency will come from the agitation of citizens who feel like the way we conduct elections undermines the legitimacy of government. Because if you are elected in a process which is marred with the chaos, violence, and manifest abuse of the law, then obviously it undermines legitimacy. But that said, even before I joined cabinet, there were already some proposals about some little changes like electronic voting. We presented the paper, and the electronic voting will not just be about fingerprints, it will also be about other biometrics, like your facial recognition, your eyelids. No, not eyelids. the iris, that is the feature of the eye which has to be recognized. So it was a very polarizing proposal. Some of us even went so far as proposing that presiding officers should wear body cameras so that whatever is going on at a polling station at any time is on record. So it's the question for the government to answer is really, to what extent are we committed to fulfilling what the Constitution requires of us? The elements of free and fair elections are well known. So when you guarantee citizens free and fair elections, at least elections that are not free and not fair are obvious. You can tell them. You may not know what free and fair elections are, but definitely the opposite is very clear. So we are still grappling with that. This is our country. We really have got to debate those issues. And I have to state here that electoral reforms and the need to institutionalize free and fair election is not a partisan issue. In any case, even within the political parties, those discussions are ongoing. The primaries of many political parties, particularly those of the NRM, you have seen machine guns even blazing. You know the case of Mwesigwa Rukutana. These were primary elections, not even national elections. So this is not a partisan issue, and there is no need to make it a partisan issue. It is all the more important for us to stress that the fact that the national resistance movement had one main card to justify the taking up of arms to confront the government of the Uganda People's Congress led by Milton Obote. They accused them of rigging elections. So it is clear that rigging an election is a very serious matter, and it is a matter that nobody should take lightly. And the evidence is there, because it is not only politicians who have been condemning rigging. The court judgments are there about what goes on during elections. And we know what we need to do. So the ball is in our court. I'm now inside the government, and it's up to me to let you know that I'm doing my best.
Thank you very much. Let me come to Dr. Sarah. Hearing the Honorable Minister talk about constitutional reforms, the process that is ongoing, 16 months, 2 campaigns, October next year. Looking at 29 years of this constitution, has it achieved its objectives before we become surgical or surgeons to be able to put it apart there? And what is the lifespan of the constitution?
Well, the constitution is a living document. It has no time limit. It can be amended. It can be retired in the interest of a new one. It can be, for example, in our past constitutional history, it has been overthrown. I think 3 times. So, but the Constitution is a living document, meaning it should be practiced by all stakeholders daily, but also improved through amendments or jurisprudence by courts of law through interpretation. So when you have these elements of the Constitution, constitutionalism needs 3 prerequisites to take root. One is a recognition that it is a supreme law of the land by all stakeholders. Number 2 is citizens who understand the Constitution and are able to promote and defend it. Number 3 is institutions that can uphold rule of law, but also institutions like political parties and daily reference of the Constitution, both in their work, but also to give it more meaning. So once you don't have these 3 elements, the Constitution becomes a mere piece of paper. And I know it has been referred to as such, unfortunately, in some instances in this country. So our biggest problem is that we lack constitutionalism. The problem is not the Constitution, but the practice of recognizing the Constitution, living by the Constitution, prophesying by the Constitution, and also making sure that nobody violates the Constitution. So until we have these 3 elements functional, we shall keep struggling to make sure constitutionalism takes root in this country. In light of elections, I think for the 29 years of the 1995 Constitution, we have been running or conducting elections almost in contempt of the Constitution. The 3 times our elections have been put to test in the courts of law, the courts have ruled that our elections fall short of the standards envisaged in our Constitution. In the last election petition, the Supreme Court went a step further and tried to guide the executive and the legislature on how we can achieve or attain credible, free, and fair elections. They gave 3 directives with timelines. And the timeline for the first 2 years passed. 2 professors went to court to, they sued the Attorney General for contempt. But up to now, the executive has been living in contempt because those directives were given to the Attorney General to implement. 6 of the 8 recommendations were enacted in the 2020 electoral amendments. Unfortunately, because of COVID, the amendments have not been implemented so far, but they were enacted. 2 of the recommendations or directives are still pending, and one of them is a punishment for public officers who engage in partisan politics and campaigns. And this is very critical because of the role the army and other public servants play in undermining electoral democracy in this country. The second recommendation is on enacting regulations on use of technology in our elections. We have been using technology in elections, although our elections are not purely digital, they are not yet 100% digital, but we have use of technology in elections. Up to now, we have no guidelines on use of technology in elections, and our fellow panelist, the Honorable Minister, is the line minister for this, and regulations are drawn by the ministry, and it would be good to know why his ministry, that is full of lawyers, a legal drafting department, cannot draft regulations for use of technology in elections for the approval of Parliament. We have other challenges like the diaspora and prisoners vote in elections. There was a petition in the last elections to ensure that Ugandans in diaspora or others in gazetted areas like prisons are able to vote. The court ruled in favor of the petitioner, and the Electoral Commission and Attorney General entered into a consent agreement with a promise that in the next elections, which is 16 months away, the two constituencies will be enabled to vote. Up to now, there is no legal framework on how the diaspora, Ugandans in diaspora will vote, or how people in gazetted centers will vote. We also have a challenge of officers who work on polling day, who are supposed to vote 3 or 2 days before, so that they are enabled to do their work, like Electoral Commission officers, like the medical fraternity and policemen. They are supposed to vote 3 days before, like is the practice in other countries. Some countries, even it's 1 week, those who have trust in their systems and can prevent manipulation of the votes. But they are supposed to vote before, because this day, for example, Electoral Commission officers, they don't work in areas where there are voters, including policemen, people who stay in hospitals, because you can't stop people from falling sick because there is elections. These people don't exercise their sovereign rights. And it's not fair that because of the care of duty or the duty they have to do in elections, they forfeit their sovereign rights to determine who should govern them. As I go towards the conclusion, we need electoral reforms, and there's a range of reforms, like the minister has highlighted. But our biggest challenge as a country is not the law. It's the practice and conduct of the people that are supposed to implement the law. Even in the absence of electoral reforms, the current laws can enable a country to have a fair and credible election. But the hijack of elections as an exercise is what we should prevent in this country, to enable the sovereign rights of the people to prevail. We have a big element of state capture in the institutions that are supposed to conduct elections. You reach a time as an observer in elections, a time comes when you know that you don't need to talk to Electoral Commission, but maybe you need to have a conversation in Imbuya on what is happening, and it's not Electoral Commission. A time comes when candidates are arrested, campaign rallies are disrupted by the army and police in this country. People are not allowed to access radio stations. Even when they enter, they are pulled out of live shows by the army in this country, by the police. And our elections are a military operation. That cannot be cured by legal amendments. What is it that we need to do? And the Minister of Justice is here, and he knows what happens.
Dr. Sarah, we're going to come back to the area of the elections themselves and what happens there. Let's finish the constitution and the reforms that are there so that we can come and discuss things in the election. Charity, let me come to you. You have been a proponent of seeing that electoral reforms are in place, constitutional reforms are in place. But when you look at this constitution and what has happened to it over these 29 years, is constitutionalism the problem? Where is the problem to be able to have a constitution that works for everyone and have constitutionalism in a country like ours?
So where is the problem? And I think the minister nailed it for me, because he told us that there is no commitment from the government and from the executive to execute the reforms that have been suggested by the court. For me, that nails it. That is the problem. And until that commitment is conjured by the powers that be, and I like the fact that he also says that reforms are not partisan. They are an issue that is cross-cutting. When the judges got a chance to think through the petition of 2016, you know, what happens is that the Supreme Court conducts an inquiry. That is what the law requires. So during the inquiry in 2016, they discovered about 2 or 3 fundamental things. Number one, that as much as there is a time frame that the inquiry should exist for 30 days, the procedure for the inquiry is not stipulated by the Constitution, and Parliament had also not given guidelines on how that inquiry takes place. And they recommended that let Parliament come up with proper guidelines on how that inquiry can be conducted. Now, for me, that is a low-hanging fruit. That should have been something very small for Parliament to have done, come up with those procedures, and then court knows that for definite, this is how we do it. The second thing they talked about in 2016 was the 20 days for annulment of an election. They said, look, the grounds to annul an election, the Constitution does not definitely state them. And they also said there is a gap there in the rules and the mechanism of those grounds for annulment. Then they talked about the days, 20 days. They said, look, to organize a whole election takes you a number of years. Now you annul an election and you're supposed to conduct a re-election if you've annulled it in 20 days. That is a wish. And I agree with court. And so court said we need to review this time and we need to think through it such that if there comes a time when the court thinks that no, this has been beyond us, this election needs to be annulled, they don't have to be debating on the question of if we annul now these 20 days, what will happen? It's going to be chaotic. That is one of the reasons they give for not ever considering such a thing as annulment. But that might be complicated as it is, and maybe we will hear from Honorable Segona why members of Parliament have not considered some of the things that court told them from 2016. But the one that should be as simple as eating kalo should have been the question of technology. And the Honorable Minister of Constitutional Affairs has told us that every election we leave it with a bitter taste in our mouth because of not agreeing on results. That we keep asking ourselves on the question of how are these results being transmitted and how are those block figures coming up. We need a process that is transparent right from the polling station to the National Tally Center. But what we see is that we get the results at the polling station, and before we know it, at the district tally center, it's a totally different picture for those that have been at polling stations and maybe tallied in 3 or 5 or 10 polling stations. They are seeing something totally different at the district tally center, and they can't relate what exactly is taking place. Now they have told you that we are using technology, but the use, conduct, and management of that technology in elections is also not clear. The law does not stipulate it clearly, and the judges said it. The judges said Electoral Commission was basing on the Interpretation Act, Section 23 of the Interpretation Act, which was also ambiguous in as far as the use, conduct, and management of technology is concerned, as far as the results are concerned. Now, they said, the judges now, in 2016, And see, I lost an opportunity with 2021. I still think that NUP cheated us. They should have just gone on with that case. For purposes of hearing what court would say, number one. Number two, for purposes of correlating the trends. So we know in 2001, this is what the judges told us. In 2006, this is what they told us. Of course, 2011, we missed that opportunity as well when Besigye said, I'm going to go to work. But we have 2016. Now, we know there are certain things which have kept coming up from 2001. One of them being civic education. The judges said, until we have continuous civic education, we shall not have free, fair, credible elections, because the citizens themselves do not understand why these processes happen in the first place. When they see people on these TV stations talking about reforms or demanding, like the Honorable Minister said, until we get citizens to agitate for these reforms, that they need them, then government will not consider it as a priority. Maybe we need to also protest. But when you say such a thing, then they say, aha, there is a rioter on TV. But no, this rioter is saying, in as far as our democracy is concerned, we need good electoral processes. And one of the things that needs to happen, like yesterday, are the reforms. And one of the reforms that needs to happen is civic education, continuous civic education, that every new voter will know what is expected of them in an election. Even the old voter will start to understand some of the processes. There are people who have participated in all these elections, and ask them, what is boundary delimitation? They will say, so what is it? At least for you now, you know there is shifting. There is amalgamating of polling stations. There is breaking down of numbers. Now you know that, Timothy. But how many Ugandans know that when you tell them about it? How many of them understand the essence of them following through on the process of the National Voter Register? How many? Very few of them. And the Honorable here will tell you how he missed out on being on the voters register. I want him to repeat that story, because recently we talked about it and people were arguing that it's not true. He did not miss being on the register, but he's here himself. Now today, I want him to tell...
This time he'll be there because he's in charge of the register.
I want him to tell the world that there came a time when he even had his national ID, but he wasn't on the register. Okay, and so he was denied his fundamental right.
He had participated in the previous election.
He was denied his fundamental right to vote, and it can happen just about to anybody. So when we talk about these reforms, we don't talk about them in bad faith. We talk about these reforms because we understand that until these processes improve, we do not have elections. We have selections.
Wow. Very... Honorable Seguna, do we have selections or elections? But before we get to that, why, as a member of parliament, these recommendations made, constitutional reforms suggestions, proposals made, why isn't parliament having conversations in this area, especially since your representation of the people?
Not a very hard one to respond to, first of all. But to begin with, I will start from where you stopped at congratulating His Majesty Kabaka of Uganda on celebrating 31 years on the throne, and to congratulate everybody in Uganda upon the strides that we have made over the years and the achievements registered so far, and to wish a long and good life to His Majesty. I want to thank my colleagues that have spoken first. Formerly my brother, now my brother-in-law, Honorable Norbert Mao. He did the undoable. You know, I always thought he's my brother until I knew he was sneaking behind my back to go and capture my sister from the Ingabi clan. Now, mentioning electoral reforms, I think the reforms we need in this country go beyond legal and electoral. We need to start with reforming ourselves. The tenacity of the people of Uganda, exercisable through demands and agitations, I think, to me, is the biggest reform that we need. I agree with Dr. Birete that the problem is not absence of the law. We have one of the best laws in this country. We were only trying to improve by demanding for more. For example, is it not criminal to vote twice? To vote twice. We had a gentleman, was it Dr. Nduhura somebody? He was kicked out of Parliament for voting twice. Now, when you see soldiers in the National Army uniform, one, taking as many votes as they possibly can, inserting them in the box, what has that one got to do with the law? Charity talked about transmission of results. You remember in 2016, the quote-unquote transmission center in Naguru, where Dr. Besigye and Lord Mayor Lukwago were arrested from, and where they were saying that it is manned by soldiers. First of all, that was confirmed when they went there and they were arrested from there. That results before they cross to the Electoral Commission go through Naguru. Is that also a matter of law? But let's not talk about the law. If I remember well, the last time the Honorable Norbert Mao appeared on this program, we appeared together when he had just been appointed. And unlike many other people, I congratulated him. One, this very gentleman chaired the team that went around the country collecting views with a view to amending the Constitution. And that is the team that generated the Citizens Compact. Him, Dr. Olaro Tunu, and the rest of us participating. I was Minister of Justice for the alternative government for 10 years, from 2011 to 2021. And it is not true that we have not done what we are supposed to do as Parliament. We have done. I'll give you an example. In 2015, there was an attempt to amend both the Constitution and the electoral laws. We went and did that report from Kamuli. The Legal and Parliamentary Affairs Committee came up with a report. I dissented and wrote a minority report, which was a reflection and representation of the entire Citizens Compact, the views we had collected from across the country. I did, and of course supported with a number of other colleagues. For the first time in the history of this country, under the leadership of the late Right Honorable Jacob Olanya, may his soul rest in peace. He said, number one, first of all, when a bill is brought before Parliament, it is a vehicle upon which you are all free to load your luggage and baggages. That's how I came up with those views of incorporating what was not contained in the bill. For the first time in the history of this country, a minority report was not rejected and it was not adopted. The Speaker said, since there is proposed a Constitutional Review Commission, and now they are saying the time is not enough, let's keep these ones as a property of Parliament, so that when the Constitutional Review Commission is put in place, the first material to be picked will be this minority report. It is still there. And it was the promise of the Honorable Fred Ruhindi, then Deputy Attorney General, very, very dignified and decent man, making a promise. The first thing we are doing in the next government is Constitutional Review Commission. And I asked, supposing you don't come back, as we intend to retire you. He said, now that you are the proponents, if you are in government, the first thing you will do is that. We came back in 2016. We started immediately demanding for this. It didn't happen. In 2019, the Honorable Niwagaba, Shadow Attorney General, and myself brought a constitutional amendment bill, again loading the entirety of the Citizens Compact. So Charity, it's not true that we're not doing anything. We did. How it collapsed or failed to take off, one, because of the consistent promises. We trusted them the same way Honorable Mao trusted them. Until towards the end, and we said, no, now it is time to bring up our reforms. We brought them, private members' bill. We were denied a certificate of financial implications. Remember under Article 93, you cannot present anything. If a private member
Of course.
is not allowed to present anything that may constitute a charge on the consolidated fund. And tell me which constitutional electoral reforms would succeed to be implemented without inflicting a charge on the consolidated fund. Luckily, we had inserted something. I don't know if they noticed where we were going then, in the Public Finance Management Act, that if you do not issue a certificate of financial implications and you keep quiet, after a lapse of a number of days, it is deemed to have been granted. So, the bill was there. It was never placed on the order paper. We pushed. And quite strategically for the NRM colleagues, that is a time when you cannot even have the numbers to pass the constitutional amendment. Why? Because everybody is running up and down in their constituencies. I really sympathize with the Honorable Norbert Mao, because you did ask him whether time is on his side. It is certainly not on his side, in addition to the fact that he was duped. I sat here where Honorable Babu is seated. Norbert sat there, and I told him.
He was duped by who?
He was duped by Yoweri Museveni. Clearly. And I think it has been a public disagreement, where Norbert says, in our discussions, we agreed on this and this and that. And one of them is here, he can't deny. One of them were constitutional reforms, electoral reforms. And Museveni says, no, 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 no. I don't know what Mao is talking about. What is so hard about removing the army from electoral politics, from the elections? What is so hard about removing RDCs and the police from national politics and elections? It is so hard because without them, Museveni will not be president. And he thinks, I don't know whether by way of delusion, illusion, or otherwise, that the moment you allow these reforms, you're signing yourself out of power. Because the only way he has been succeeding is abusing those very institutions we're talking about. But they're already barred from participating in partisan politics. Is it not in the Constitution? Is it not in the UPDF Act? It is there. So, it is about the spirit of constitutionalism. In Uganda, what turned the Uganda into discipline was the thinking that Kabaka Masomoji, he's seeing you wherever you are. So you can't do this because the Kabaka is watching over you. The moment Ugandans learn a culture that if I do this, the Constitution is watching over me, the law is following me, we will get saved, we will get liberated. Talking about, I think Sarah talked about the turbulent history of our constitutional law and how people have been overturning and abolishing the constitution, so to say. Museveni has actually abrogated this constitution 1,000 times. Why? A person who feels and chest thumps that, you know, I can run this country without a chief justice for 3 years. I can run this country without a governor, Bank of Uganda, for 3 years, and nothing will happen to me. He feels he's the constitution. The Constitution is himself. If any other person does any act which he thinks is offensive to the Constitution, he will act. If the Constitution is an impediment to his will, wishes, and aspirations, he will not act. Or he could even act contrary to the Constitution. Now, talking about the constitutional reform, the Law Reform Commission and the Constitutional Review Commission, and then the question of money. It is not true, Honorable Norbert Mao. We have never denied government money in Parliament. We go by the budget presented by the executive. I can challenge anybody to bring a budget proposal with the provision or proposition that they want to establish a Constitutional Review Commission, and the Parliament rejected it. No. To the contrary, and I agree with Norbert, that it is not a priority area for Joel Museveni. Forget.
Thank you very much. Captain Francis Babu, let me come to you. When you hear 45.9 million Ugandans as the results that came in by you boss there, and you look at these constitutional reforms, electoral reforms, can they deliver what Ugandans desire? A free, fair, credible, and peaceful election.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank the other people who have contributed. My main aim is not even going to go these beautiful laws I've heard them talking about. I'm going to talk about the mindset of our leaders, number one, and the whole political class. And don't let me deceive you, one group with the other. No, they are all the same. Their mother is the same. They behave the same way. Now, from that point of view, let's go to the population, who are completely, the majority of them don't even know what is going on. So once you have got that point, then you go back and say about the law. The laws we have had in this country are so many, and if we had followed them to the letter, we would not even be talking. A few, changes here and there because of the time. When the time changes, a few laws must be reviewed. I agree entirely. Free and fair election. My man called Stalin, Joseph, many years ago, said, "Those who vote decide nothing. Those who count the votes decide everything." That was Stalin. Malpractices in every election in Africa, you've had a lot of people talking about. Some of the proposal, like the Independent Electoral Commission. I've had one which is not very far from this country, our neighboring country. They decided to have an Independent Electoral Commission, and they entertained us on television how they were electing them. I enjoyed that. As far as I'm concerned, it was dramatic. At the end of it, they had an Independent Electoral Commission. At the end of the election, they wanted to slaughter everybody who was in that Electoral Commission, which was supposedly independent. So it doesn't matter. If we had to follow the right thing done, it doesn't matter how it is elected, as long as they follow the law. From that point of view, free and fair elections can be done, but we have to have a mindset change, starting with being fair. In the Constitution, we put there that it should be civic education for the whole population, and not voters' education only, which you do when you're coming for the elections. That has never taken place. We need to have started, even in primary schools, even in our syllabus, by telling parents not to give kids sweets when they are going to elect their prefects. We have very bad manners. We need to change our attitude before we go into these beautiful things of laws. Now, the constitutional review my brother is talking about. I was in the Constitutional
Assembly.
Yeah, I was among those women. The draft constitution we got was made by very big experts. And over the years, I'm becoming disenchanted. A lot of our people seems to be educated in Britain and America. Our elite seems to be, I think those guys have done something to our people. If these were inoculations, I think they have become British and Americans. They no longer think about us as Ugandans. I would have wanted, you have to understand our people and their problems, rather than bringing these theories they are picking up from these countries and coming to put them on us. I've heard of the Supreme Court, I've heard of Parliament, and then of course the Constitutional Review Commission. In this short period of time, you can't have a Constitutional Review Commission. You need a little bit more time, that's for sure, if you have to do the whole Constitution. Unless if you're going to pick up a few areas that you want to change. Now, we also have a problem, although people don't want to believe it, but foreigners are also interfering in our thinking. So we need to find out how to handle all these problems. A few minutes ago, I checked on my identity card. It will end in November, 27th November. I hope by the time we go for elections, I'll have a new identity card. I'm told
you mean the national ID?
It's national ID.
Yes.
I'm told we are getting one. We are starting at the end of this new month to get new ones. Another point. From that point of view, I go to the security. You can't have elections without security. Take it or leave it. You don't want the army. You don't want all other security agencies. You only want the police. You only have 43,000 policemen. Can those 43,000 policemen supervise an election and give it security? Is that enough? I've been hearing this propaganda against army, against this. Uganda has got one word, it's called security. And we have a national security committee where all those people sit. They decide how security is going to be done. And it's done by making sure that we have enough numbers. Now, I've heard of allegations. Oh, people in uniform are ticking. How about those in green shirts also ticking? And those in red shirts also ticking? And also in yellow shirts ticking? They are not talking about that. If you are talking about vote rigging, all political players have been involved in vote rigging in this country. And if you want, we have proof. And some of them, when they talk, they point fingers like this. They forget that the thumb is pointing in them. And the other three fingers. They should never be unfair. Our army, some of them are extremely professional. And when they are given a job to supplement the police, they do a good job. Now let's go to the other point. When you talk about elections have been spoiled here and there, what is the percentage in Uganda, in all those electoral votes you've been, electoral
polling
areas you've been talking about, how many of those have had problems? What's the percentage? And how about the ones that have done well? We don't count those. The army has been there, the police has been there. Now, if they can tell me the numbers of the places where the elections has gone wrong and what the problem was, maybe we can be able to find an answer. This is also propaganda against the government. The government itself does not tell the policemen or the army men, please go there and cheat in the votes. But the political groups tell their members to go and cheat. In Kampala here, they vote from one station to another. And they're different parties. And they all rig elections. If you even want to know, they even change them after what Stalin said. And money is involved, and groups are involved, and even funny characters are involved in this, and we know who they are.
Okay.
So now I want to bring this point out because I want us to be fair. When we are talking about all these good laws, they are talking about that we should change here, and they're including the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court also could be given false information to rely on by certain players in this game. I want us to be very, very careful. Yes, this country has had a lot of problems. They have regarded the Constitution, they have changed the Constitution, they have done all sorts of things. But what I would like us to do is say, yes, okay, this has happened. What is the nuisance? The nuisance in this whole thing is not the law, it's the people themselves. And our leaders have to change their mindset right away before we even do anything. And they stop accusing each other. I was happy when my colleague here was saying, oh, when we brought this thing, they refused. Yes, they would refuse because you've been telling them what they are doing is not right. You are continuously telling them you are going to remove them out of office next week. You call yourself alternative government instead of saying you are the minority. There are all sorts of things that we look at. I am the minister of this. He must go. I mean, the man you want to go, he wants you also to go. It takes two to tango.
Okay.
I want us to be very careful. It is not the law. The law, a few mistakes can be put or can be corrected. But what I want us to say, that including the minority or the alternative government, they must change their mindset. The mindset here, including the minister himself, he has found mistakes here and there in the law. That's fine. Let's correct those. But at the end of the day, we want to have a free and fair election, and I want us to get those percentages, and where the election has gone wrong, we talk about that. Where it has not gone wrong, we should congratulate them and pat them on the back. Because the majority, and I don't know about Mr. Mao, but I think the majority did not have the problem. There are places you can count where the problem was. And you cannot say the whole. And by the way, let me ask those who are in leadership in this country, please stop abusing our security organs.
Okay.
Please. If the security organ has done something wrong, try him. Use the martial court. Put him in prison. But if they have not done anything wrong, don't continue hammering it. The army is this, the army is that. No.
Okay.
Because these people are looking after us.
Thank you very much, Captain Babu. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back from this break, we'll be discussing the elections, especially the ones in the near past, and what the future of 2026 will look like in the eyes of APAN. This and more after this break.
You used to tell me that I don't make you happy. All that time you would be complaining. I'll call you every day, yeah, yo, baby, don't go.
You can now get all the Chibuzi out with MTN voice bundles. Call all networks. Kubei Dondoro. Buy a 25-minute voice bundle for only 1,000. Or buy any daily voice bundle of your choice. Dial *100 *21# and select daily, or use the My MTN app. When we talk together, we are unstoppable.
Juko.
Yo.
Wachiko. Check the shopping, man. What's your secret?
Uganda, haven't you heard of the parish development model PDM?
Yes, I did, but I thought it was just a talk.
No, Sebatia. It is real. I and a few friends together formed a circle, accessed money from the PDM, invested in a portrait project, and now things are moving.
Juko. I thought I was one of your friends.
You are.
But you left me behind.
I didn't leave you in poverty. What you do, just visit your LC2 chairperson and your parish chief and start the process of economic transformation. Just like that.
Okay.
The parish development model is an initiative from the government of Uganda through the Ministry of Local Government designed to transform all lives of Ugandans for the better. PDM, my parish, my development, my life.
Coming soon on UBC.
Welcome to Inside Broadcasting.
Sharing with you the process behind what you see on the screens.
My name is Lorene Masika Kazimoto.
Step behind the scenes and witness the magic that brings your daily broadcasts to life.
That's why I come out openly to actually tell you that I'm an investigative journalist. That even when you see me here, I'm actually investigating you guys. So you should be aware about that.
Experience the hustle, the heart, and the human stories of our on and off-air staff.
I see my phone ringing and I'm like, ooh, which number is this? I hear the president on the other line.
The President of the Republic of Uganda.
Of Uganda, yes.
Be inspired, amazed, and part of the journey that powers Uganda's most captivating TV and radio moments.
Because good broadcast comes down to an individual. They should be artistic.
This is Inside Broadcasting.
Inside Broadcasting.
Inside Broadcasting with Mark Wadula.
Coming soon on UBC.
Welcome back from that quick commercial break here on Behind the Headlines. My name is Timothy Nyangweso. In the studio, I'm joined by Dr. Sarah, Charity, Honorable Segona, Captain Francis Babu, and the Honorable Minister, Norbert Mao there. Well, let me read some feedback coming through. This is William Echweru in Soroti City. My plea is that the EC ought to correct the boundaries between the constituencies of Soroti East and Soroti West, respectively. This would be in line with the resolution passed by the Soroti District Council way back to create Soroti City. The boundary is currently simple to believe. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the views by the panelists there. The constitution in this country is like the Green Book once used in Libya. Teacher Asimwe Julius from Bara. Interesting. Thank you, Timothy, for the panel show today. It's the best panel there. The only problem is that such smart brains and the good legal recommendations for the constitution, but they end up in a messed up election. Let's hope the minister will pick a leaf and give us hope for the next elections. This is Wilson in Muyenga. Finally, thank you for the show. Uganda needs to go the Chinese way. Selection, then election. The current electoral process cannot guarantee competent people assuming office in Uganda. This is Fred. Thank you very much. Keep your messages coming. We'll be responding to those even as we get through the show. Honorable Minister, let me come to you. I've heard you use the word Uganda is a pressure cooker. It needs a vent for it to put out the pressure. And you have labored to tell us what programs you have been doing. How far with this pressure cooker? And what are the processes, especially looking at 2026 as an election?
It is said that there is really nothing new in the world. Even the Bible says it.
There's nothing new under the sun.
Yes. What are the combustible elements? Number one, we go back to what everybody who has studied in his political science knows: a social contract, a covenant between the government and the citizens. And we will obey you. When you tell us keep left, we shall keep left. When you say lockdown, we shall not come out. Ugandans actually are very obedient. I saw that during the lockdown. I really think you really have to be of a certain breed to think Ugandans are a cantankerous lot. Ugandans know our history. They know that violence can beget violence. All these are things that they know. And despite the anger, actually it is the duty of the government to read in between all the fuming, all the vents and insults, and get what citizens are actually saying. What are the expectations of citizens? They expect that, first and foremost, the government will secure their rights. And in return, citizens have certain responsibilities to pay taxes, to obey the laws, and generally to respect also other citizens. This pressure cooker has come about because there's a question that, is there a light at the end of the tunnel? Or there's more tunnel at the end of the light? Ultimately, Ugandans need to see that it is possible for governments to change peacefully. It is an agitation. This is not anything new, I'm saying. So the pressure cooker has always been about some of the things that are in the recommendations of the Supreme Court. Use of state resources by an incumbent. That definitely. By the way, in America, when the president who is campaigning uses Air Force One, they pay. That's why you hear they have to raise a lot of money. You have to pay if it is for a campaign purpose. It is basically about a level ground. If I know your father was a great boxer, assuming I was to be in a boxing match, you know the General Francis Nyangweso.
I know him very well.
Yes, that's his father. So assuming I found myself in a boxing ring with General Nyangweso, but I hire goons to first tie him up, but I don't tie him so badly that he cannot stand, then I give him the mother of all beatings to make it better in dim light. By the time the lights are bright, he is down and I'm the champion. I don't think I'll tell my grandchildren that I was the greatest. This is what this is about. An election should not be a struggle for survival. I must not be fighting for my life every day. And I have been through, in '96, I was in the middle of a very violent election.
Moto.
Yes. I came by the skin of my teeth. I found them. He was one of those who used to be sympathetic to me. And he used to hold me by the shoulder and say, if I had been the one to say the things you have said, people would have listened. But because it is coming from you, and I think that's what you're talking about, you called it mindset, but I call it prejudice. So there's mutual prejudice. The government is prejudiced against the civil society, which they now blanketly brand as mouthpieces of enemies of progress, and then the civil society is also prejudiced against the government. So now we are called a junta. Now I'm also a member of the junta. Now imagine Norbert Mao as a member of the junta.
The Spanish actually say junta.
Oh yes, I think that's the correct pronunciation. So now, junta. So the Honorable Captain Francis Babu is talking about detoxifying the political environment, introducing a measure of civility, and the pressure cooker is exactly that language. Somebody wakes up and records a video and throws it to millions of Ugandans. And from those making Rolex to borders, they all gather. And the whole day, somebody, instead of sowing crops that can be useful, they are sowing weeds into the minds of Ugandans. And that creates lots of lies, and all of us have been victims of it, including the Honorable Segona. All of us have been at the receiving end. There's nobody here who has, maybe probably Charity has not been, and Timothy. They are the youngest. Yes. So the pressure cooker is fueled by what I would call regime change fundamentalism. We are not going to engage you. The only topic to be discussed is your departure. and it must be immediate. Now, I read a little story about the contest between the wind and the sun. Which of the two would force a man to remove his coat? And the wind said, I'll go first. And the wind blew and raged, and the more it raged, the more tighter the man held onto his coat. And the wind failed, because the man really buttoned up to his ears and held onto his coat. The wind said, okay, sun, let me see what you can do. The sun just smiled on this guy. He started feeling hot at the collar, loosened the button a little bit. It became hotter. He unbuttoned the entire length of the coat. In no time, he had removed the coat. So now we have these two forces of regime change fundamentalism and those who seek constructive engagement, which really, I believe, is another way of saying, do we escalate the confrontation or do we de-escalate it? It has happened even on a global scale. Look at the Cold War. The buildup of nuclear warheads. Russia is escalating, America is escalating. Russia even says America must feel the danger. They even try to take their warheads into Cuba, and 90 miles away from the US border. And when the other president, I think he was called Nikita Khrushchev, negotiated with Kennedy.
His prime minister.
Yes, he negotiated and said, okay, I am going to remove my missiles and so on, but America must promise not to attack us. But secretly, Kennedy had said, on top of that, we are going to remove our missiles that are in Turkey. But that was not made public. And he told Khrushchev, don't beat your chest about it. It will embarrass me. I must appear strong.
But he did beat the table in the United Nations.
With the second pair of shoes, which he had carried in a bag. So people thought he had removed his shoe. Anyhow, eventually, it went up and up and up. It escalated so much until they realized that we need to talk. Of course, now the escalation is going back again. So the pressure cooker is about engagement or confrontation. Those of us who believe in engagement will, of course, be abused as sellouts, as people who are looking for jobs, as people who have abandoned the struggle, as traitors. It is the same language that everybody who seeks to build a bridge will meet. Whether you're Martin Luther King, they called him Uncle Tom, that he's a house slave as opposed to a field slave.
A lot of African leaders are Uncle Toms, yes, you're right.
So the language is part of the pressure cooker. I have said publicly that the president should stop calling critics from the civil society enemies of Uganda. I've said it very publicly. I said,
Foreign agents.
The foreign agents is another matter. But if you receive money, it must be based on some contract. And there are NGO laws. And you know, the main business of government is gathering information. So even don't know why the government should be lamenting publicly. The government is the biggest information gatherer about everybody. If the government wants to know something about you, there's nothing you can do about it. There's even no way you can hide it. You could probably say that the government may not have the ability to analyze all the information it gathers. But if a question of gathering mountains of information, government gathers. So I have said publicly that, Mr. President, these are our citizens. Stop calling them enemies of Uganda. I've also said civil society, stop calling the government a junta. Because, you know, a junta is unelected. A junta is basically gangsters. They have no rules by which they play. That's what a junta is. it is something which is very, very bad, especially if we want to set the stage for talking. So what would be the vent? The vent is through a national dialogue. Now,
it's back.
Dialogue in whatever form. Since we are celebrating the 31st anniversary of the coronation of His Majesty the King of Uganda, let's talk about the pressure cooker in Buganda. What have been the vents? The vents are when the president visits the king in his home. I remember tweeting, I said, the leopard has visited the lion, and that immediately reduces pressure.
And the lion did visit the leopard.
Of course, the lion has visited the leopard many times.
Okay.
The lion's father used to be a president of Uganda. He's also a first son in many ways, apart from being the king. So that de-escalates tension. In Tanzania, the presidential candidate Tundu Lissu, who is my friend, was shot 36 bullets under Magufuli. 16 went into his body. He had to be smuggled under pressure from diplomats, the so-called foreign agents. You know, Uganda's constitution invites foreigners, by the way, into our affairs, because the constitution says there will be no derogation from human rights except to the extent that is acceptable in a free and democratic society. So the standard is not just Ugandan standards, it is a global standard. So Tundu Lissu goes into exile. He tries to contact President Suluhu Hassan after the death. And Tundu Lissu was so angry when Magufuli died. You know what he tweeted? He said, I wish to quote Mark Twain, that I don't wish any man dead, but there are some obituaries that I read with great pleasure. That's what he tweeted. I called him. I said, my brother, what has come into your head? He said, it has made me feel very good to put that tweet, because I did not wish President Magufuli dead, but reading his obituary has made me very happy. That's the anger. And you have got to recognize people's emotions and sentiments. So then he said, but now we have a new president. I want to talk to my president. And he said it publicly in a meeting that I was on. So I said, do you want to speak to President Suluhu Samia? I think my president of Uganda, President Museveni, knows how to do it. So I looked for President Museveni, and I said, there's one thing you need to do for the leader of opposition of Tanzania. He wants to talk. Eventually you saw, cut a long story short, they met in Brussels. Now the Tanzanian opposition did not declare Tundu Lissu to be a sellout. But can you imagine the NUP president, Robert Chagulanyi, in a Washington, D.C. hotel with President Museveni, talking about Uganda? You can imagine what would be happening in this country. So it is up to us leaders to work on de-escalating this toxic environment.
Sanitization.
When the opposition party, which is Chadema, was celebrating the International Women's Day in Arusha, who was their guest of honor? President Suluhu Hassan. In Uganda, that would be a scandal. So I think we must not behave like disjoint sets. Can we look for an intersection? I don't mind being considered wrong now, but for sure I'll be considered right many years from today.
Thank you very much. Let me bring in Dr. Sarah. Doctor, let's get to these elections. Why are elections in this country a life or death matter? You look at 2016, look at it's like the level of violence just escalates. And like the Honorable Minister said, where is the vent to put out this pressure cooker?
Well, you know, when Honorable Mao was just submitting I was also on the show with Honorable Segon and Honorable Mao when he had just signed the memorandum with the government and become a minister, and he was sharing what he wished to do in his first 100 days, and I think the MOU was 3 years. So we told him it is everything he was intending to do was very good, but we told him he was trying to do it in a wrong place and at the wrong time because of mistrust. And I think at the end of this MOU, we shall be proven right, because whatever I intended to do, well-meaning, fundamentals, what this country needs to do to put out the pressure cooker, but I don't know whether he has achieved any of those very good things that he wanted to do. For 2 reasons. There is no commitment to the betterment of this country in terms of inclusivity and constitutionalism. 2, there has been a chain of mistrust from Nairobi peace talks, the broad-based government that the late Kawanga Semogere has joined, infidelity with the constitution, even the one that was birthed under NRM itself. Nobody can celebrate that it's been implemented. I know we'll be celebrating 29 years on 8th October. And we shall have an event to reflect. I hope Honorable Minister will join us. So to what extent, or why should people have faith that we can sit on table, or that what has happened, for example, Tundu Lissu and Mama Samia, can happen today? And why should people believe when your MOU is not being implemented? Why? So that's why people have this level of mistrust. Because whatever is agreed, laid on table, it does not come to pass in terms of implementation. The people in leadership today use dialogue as propaganda to cool down tempers, but they are not committed. The Interreligious Council spent 2 years preparing for national dialogue in this country. When it reached that the communicate start public consultations, it ended in a photo moment at State House. And the signed communique has never appeared. And the process aborted. So why should we then, as much as we say everybody has reached the extreme levels, why is the middle ground? If people prepare dialogue and it never happens, if you go into cooperation with NRM and there is nothing to write home about, so what are the choices? What choices are people left with? So coming to your question, and then maybe to answer, Honorable Mao brought a good narrative of a general, and referred to your father, may he rest in peace. And yes, but also in the Bible there is David and Goliath. Maybe when all hope is lost, then Ugandans are looking for a David to kill Goliath with a stone. Because what are the options? If the constitution is not working, if there is no fidelity with the constitution, with agreements, with the, then what should people do? So why are elections a do or die? The first reason is commercialization of politics. People sell their properties. We did a study on use of money in elections. Some people, you imagine a person using 3 billion in a constituency to become an MP. Even when you become, I don't think the total salary for 5 years can amount to 3 billion. But you have invested 3 billion in a campaign. What is it that you are doing?
For the opportunity to
steal.
To loot.
Yes, and these are the MPs caught in corruption. So you have invested this money in a small constituency to become a public servant. Does it make sense? And if you have sold your house, go to your family and bundled them in a rented house, why doesn't the election become a do or die? Because you must rebuy that house for your family, which you have sold. If you have borrowed money to go in an election, you must win, otherwise you will not pay this loan. So people mortgage their properties, people sell their properties to go in campaigns, and that's why we are saying we need a law on limits to be used, limits of money to be used in campaigns. But also, what should money do? Countries like Nepal, Netherlands, Switzerland have very good laws on regulating financing in politics, to the extent that they regulate the number of posters and sizes a candidate should make to reduce the money spent on those posters. Nepal limits a political party in elections to not use more than $1 million. That is 3.7 billion. That includes money for presidential and parliamentary, and for an MP, the party can only give you up to $20,000. That's about 78 million. I wish we could have the same here. People are spending 2 billion, 3, 5 in a constituency. Others tell you, I've made my investment. Even those MPs who don't serve their constituents. I invested. There's one MP, he has retired, who used to tell people, I paid you. Don't waste my phone and the battery calling me. I paid you, I put my vote. So what kind of service? And this also goes to the people. Why are people selling their sovereign rights? It's like Esau, when he sold his birthright for a meal in the Bible. People must know the meaning of a vote and the power of a vote, and know that they are shortchanging themselves by selling it for a cost between 500 shillings to 10,000. Because that's the maximum they can get. Imagine you sell your sovereignty for 500 shillings. So people are selling themselves cheap. And they are selling this country so cheaply. And it's no wonder that we have the quality of leadership we have in this country. Of course, not all leaders are bad. I must put that, clarify that. But majority of leaders we have, really, it's because of this vulgarization of our electoral democracy. The other thing that makes it a do or die, let's look at the nature. What kind of elections? I've highlighted a few challenges that I will go through very fast. The first challenge is where aspirants for presidential elections are not allowed to consult. Yet the law in the Presidential Elections Act under Section 3 is very clear. And the example is the arrest of Amama Mbabazi in 2015, as he attempted to go to Mbale to consult about
fantastic drama.
Yes.
Fantastic drama.
Yeah, but the others also are not allowed. It's this law, because the
others are okay, but that one was a fantastic drama.
Yeah, that's something, but for us, we documented it as an electoral irregularity, that where somebody attempted, because he applied,
should have got an Oscar for that one.
The other example is General Tumukunde in the last elections. He wrote that he will consult. With all details, he was also stopped from consulting. So you have that kind of, the toxic environment that we start with in our elections. You have the chaos during the nominations. In the last nominations, 2 candidates, opposition candidates, were arrested brutally for the FDC and NUP on nomination day. Nomination day is a very, it is a very big day in the calendar, political calendar of the candidate. Somebody is happy, they are going to celebrate, lay out their campaign plan with their supporters, and they are being undressed, suits are torn. This kind of environment does not augur well. Violence and brutality throughout the campaigns. I have stated that we did a pictorial coverage, just pictures. The English say a picture is worth 1,000 words. We just compiled pictures from nomination day to announcement of results. When you look at those pictures, Captain Babu was saying we accuse the security agencies for nothing. If you look at security agencies and the chaos they caused in the last elections, disrupting all campaign rallies, holding candidates to sleep on the roadside. General Muntu's campaigns were disrupted 46 times, and those were the least. 46 rallies of General Muntu were disrupted by police and army. The rest are more for FDs and NOB. So when we don't just accuse these people, we have evidence, documented evidence of their conduct in elections. And we also know that those violators are never punished. You look at arrests on polling day, agents being kidnapped, arrested with the declaration forms. Holding a declaration form, makes you a risk target of security to kidnap you so that you don't pass it on to your candidate. Then we have disruption and access, with access to media. I had already mentioned about it. Even where there is paid up media. Kiza Besigye went to court where he had paid space, and I think UBC was one of the media. We had the General Muntu picked out of a radio station somewhere in Kigezi and Imbare.
Even Katumba Oye.
Yes.
He has formed the party.
Guru.
As you conclude, Dr. Sarah.
Yes, sir, as I conclude, I think even refusal of candidates to have their own data compilation centers is an abuse. Because in this country, it's as if a political party having a data center is a crime. And security would round you up. Even landlords would be threatened, arrested. And then, of course, the opaqueness, which Charity had mentioned, transmission of presidential elections. As I conclude, Mr. Moderator, I would like, maybe, I don't know whether it's possible for Honorable Mao to throw light, because in the last elections, we had more than 80 districts, posting 100% voter turnout and 100% vote for one candidate. Of course, it's not possible for 1 year to say that in a district or in an area nobody died, nobody fell sick, or nobody traveled for work. So these are irregularities that are really troublesome and should be rectified in the next elections.
Thank you, Dr. Sarah. Charity, let me come to you. When you hear what Dr. Sarah is saying, especially about our past, and you take a look at our future, come 2026, what picture do you see? Especially looking at how violence has been escalating each electoral cycle. 2021, I know you were part of a tally center, and a lot happened there. When you look at 2026, where do you see this country going? Actually,
in 2021, I think the army bordered on misbehavior. And they intimidated citizens from exercising their right. You see, that constitution from Article 20 through to 50 is the Bill of Rights. Those rights, many of them have limitations. But what does the right to vote mean? What does it mean for a citizen to have a right to vote? If you read this constitution, you don't read it in isolation of other articles within that constitution. It is read as one document. If you read Article 38 and read it together with Article 59, that as soon as you're 18 years of age, you have a right to vote. What does your right to vote entail? It entails the fact that you remain the supreme owner of the vote. And I think this is what Sarah was underscoring. And Honorable Miriam Matembe one time said, Ugandans, I'm so angry with you. You are like pancakes. They buy you off at 100 shillings. She got very angry and said, I've stopped to defend Ugandans from today forward because how do you reduce yourself to a pancake? Because they don't understand the power of the vote. The vote is the only time you pronounce yourself on the governance of your country as an individual. That's the only time you get to elect your president. And I think the Honorable Tafire recently said, when we decided to put adult suffrage as the mode of electing president, we knew what we were doing by putting that constitutional clause. If you look at democracy, it has 4 tenets, key tenets. There are many, many principles that govern democracy. But I like to repeat these ones because there are people who keep wanting us to fluctuate from what democracy is. And they bring in a lot of propaganda, which I think Honorable Babu tried to talk about. They bring in a lot of stories. Okay, now it is our own Ugandan democracy. Okay, now it is now the American democracy. Okay, no. It's the African democracy. Now it is Pan-Africanism. Democracy remains democracy. And so it has 4 tenets that we must look at, even in an election season. The rule of law, citizen participation, and citizen participation then falls a lot with that Article 59 that I've been talking about, and Article 38, which says that Ugandans shall participate in the governance of their country. That is 38. But remember that even the courts are exercising judicial power on behalf of Ugandans. Article 1, power belongs to the people, which these people power now capitalized on. But the people shall exercise that power through the vote. That's the only time you come to see that power. There is no any other time when we come to see that power. So when you sell it for 100 shillings, what are you doing? When you sell it for 500 shillings, do you understand what it means to have power? To be a powerful person. Do you understand? You don't. So you're thinking of Tonto, and you're thinking of what you're going to soap above soap, or it is sugar that they have brought for you, and you have forgotten the rationale behind looking at the issues that these people are bringing on table. And that is why she was telling you the quality of our leaders is what we have right now, as a result of not understanding the power that we have. So constitutionally, when you look at all these things, I started with democracy having 4 tenets, and I have talked about the rule of law, I've talked about citizen participation, and I talk about human rights, respect for human rights. Do we respect human rights in Uganda? How much of those human rights do we respect, and do we even know they exist? And lastly, the question of elections. Elections are governed by principles, and these principles must be respected. These principles include freeness, they include fairness, they include transparency, they include accountability. It doesn't matter which political divide you come from, whether you're in government or opposition, are you an accountable leader? When you put yourself out there and you say, I have a certain budget, are you accountable to the people? Or you're just taking them on a ride, a propaganda ride, which I think Honorable Mao talked about, and Honorable Segona said, well, we have all been victims to propaganda. When do citizens understand that this is now propaganda? The real person that is representing my views as Charity is this representative, and that is why I will vote for him. Whether he gives me money, whether he doesn't give me money, I will vote for him because of his ideas. Until we get there, we don't have elections.
And I'll come back to that later on. There is an assumption that the maturity of Ugandans has gotten there.
Not
and also
exactly.
The economic state there.
Not exactly, because I will tell you, Timothy, that you see the toxicity that they are talking about, the panelists are talking about, you see on social media. America is not devoid of it. America is also struggling right now with hate speech. It's called hate speech. Because people find it very simple to sit behind their computers and say all sorts of rubbish. And sometimes you want to make sense out of rubbish and you can't make the sense. It is coming out of the auspice of social media. But if you are mature politically and you know about what we call tolerance, you as an army official will respect people of different shades of political parties. You will not misuse your power. You see, all those young people that died, the 54 that are in the police report, okay, the police stated 54. Then we have Human Rights Watch, which states 100 people that died. Then we have civil society reports that even report more than 100 that died in 2021. And then, of course, FDC says, no, in 2001, a bigger number died. But at least we didn't see police documenting a bigger number in 2001. I want first the police report because it is an institution. And they say, police will document what is not there. Even if police documents what is not there, it is an institution of government. It exists. Can we start with what the institution of government is saying before we even talk about other things? We can bring on other reports, fine, but let's start with the institutions. How do we strengthen them? If you see people dying in an election, then the process is already flawed. It's already flawed. You're not following the principles I have told you about that govern good elections.
Thank you very much. Honorable Seguna, let me come to you. And I'll start from where Charity has left off. Things like hate speech. Leaders over-promising and under-delivering. Promises, smear campaigns. We are going to hear words that are really degrading when it comes to this electoral season. How do we clean up our elections?
In the year 2001, there was an election petition, a presidential election petition between Dr. Besigye and General Yoweri Museveni. One of the contentions is where General Museveni made what were said to be reckless, and I think I'm certain that they were reckless statements against another candidate. The Supreme Court of this country held that politicians preoccupy themselves with making statements, including those that may be slanderous against each other. In another case of Charles Onyango Bo and Andrew Mujuni Mwenda, Andrew Mwenda as he then was, versus the Attorney General, the Supreme Court repeated, I believe the lead judgment of Justice Mlenga was that Nyangweso is entitled to even tell a lie about government. It is the duty of government to come out and tell the truth. That is not to say it is a moral standard. My trouble with leaders now in the studios, Captain Babu and Honorable Mao, is using a commentary or a video taken by a young man whose future has been eaten by this government to be the standard. And say, you see what these people do? That's why the government doesn't want to go. The primary reason the Museveni regime doesn't want to go is because they want to be in power, and that's perfectly in order. I have no problem with Museveni insisting that he wants to be president. You should not have or take offense with me saying, I want to remove Museveni. I am in this contest because I want to remove him and establish a status that I think is best for the country.
Honorable, just to jump in there, when you say there's no problem with the contest, the question is when you say you want to remove him, with what issue? What are you presenting?
That's the point. That's where I am. By the way, even where my views are wrong, all I need is access to those Ugandans to listen to my views and judge me. Don't judge me with your army. And this is where I take issue with the point raised by the Honorable Captain Babu. Now, the difference between this army officer and that young man seated behind his screen is that this army officer is paid money and given, given a job description. If you have a 1 Brigadier Sunday, in Masaka, a commanding officer of I don't know how many thousands of soldiers going on a public function and says, we shall not allow the opposition to take over power, even if it means killing them, etc. And he is not arraigned before the court martial. When General Tumukunde talks about it, saying the government is telling lies, etc., the next day he's arraigned. To me, there is no way, Captain Babu, you can convince me that it is not a standard operating procedure within government and the army, period. Where you have a soldier, including a private, recording himself and says, we cannot hand over power to Kyagulanyi. And his commanders do not rein in on him. When you have those soldiers that go and critique and staff ballots, then, and they are not arraigned, you cannot convince me that that's not a standard operating procedure. Sarah talked about it in the last presidential election where Charity was accosting us for withdrawing that petition.
Yes.
Look, we filed a petition. We said the following anomalies were registered. We have evidence. The law requires that you bring primary evidence. The person who recorded the video is in prison. Eventually, after the days have elapsed, they release them. I come to court and say, I now have the original. Allow me not to file the petition, but to bring this evidence. And the court says no, partly because of what Charity said, because the rules are not there, etc. It is what the judge today decides. The same thing which was done in 2016 when Honorable Mama Mbabazi filed his petition. You tell me, for me, I cannot do it now. The same person I am accusing is the person who locked up my witnesses, is the person who locked up my agents with DR forms, gave them police bonds, clearly indicating being in possession of electoral materials. And the electoral materials are a declaration of results form issued to a candidate's agent at a polling station. Up country, our coordinators who had not been compromised or arrested before could not be allowed to travel with the declaration of results forms from up country to bring to us. Our tally center had been frustrated. Our party headquarters taken over. And you say that's not consistent with what I'm calling a flawed election. And Captain Babu says, no, you are all rigging. Yes, where you find me rigging, point out. I have pointed out those I have caught on camera. Where you have RDCs, civil servants, they are the ones now leading operations against, candidates.
Broking.
They are brokering, they are blocking, etc. You have Kyagulanyi sleeping on the roadside because he cannot, he's not allowed to cross from one district to another. Honorable Norbert Mao here, he was blocked by the police. Driving peacefully, he did not even have these people, you say they are rowdy, etc. Just his convoy, I think, of about 5 vehicles. And the police say you are not proceeding. Why? You are just not proceeding. Those are their orders. Now, and you say, put the army out of this. And I can tell you, I can prophesy, it's going to get worse. I mean, if we went through that hell, when the CDF that time was probably not related, or maybe distantly related, and now we have a real son who says he also wants to become president. What is going to happen in 2026? Now, when you talk about national dialogue, Honorable Norbert Mao, I'm one of those who have never been opposed to national dialogue. But how? It must be structured. There was a national dialogue between Honorable Norbert Mao, you can also in brackets say the Democratic Party. What are the outputs? What are the variables? We have not seen the outcome of that dialogue, if it was a national dialogue anyway. the party dialogue between the two of you, even you, the two principals, are not agreeing on what you discussed, on what you agreed. On the one hand, you came out and pointed out to us, you people, you are pessimists. We have agreed on the following that is going to be done between now and the next election. And you're here lamenting like me.
Okay.
And then Genome 7 says, Mao is only a daydreamer. We have never agreed on that. The only output that came, and you know, but of course I have said before, even the last time we were here, I said, a man as intelligent as Norbert Mao, to be stupefied by himself, and in quotes, I'm not saying you're stupid, my brother-in-law, you might throw my sister out.
No, that's a legal language.
Yes.
Go ahead.
But the point is, the only output is that you were appointed minister. Nothing else. I want a dialogue where we agree on A, B, C, D. And the entire country is involved. It is informed. At the beginning you said you were discussing quietly because of characters that would come out and demonize discussions even before they become fruitful. Now they became fruitful. What do we have on table? 1 year to nominations. Can you tell me, as a lawyer as competent as I know you, that you can amend these laws, implement them, even when the Electoral Commission is already on ground, demarcating boundaries? I am not opposed to having a constituency as big as mine, which is probably one of the biggest in the country.
It is.
One of those with the biggest population, because I'm not carrying my constituency like bricks on my head. But is it compliant with the Constitution?
Okay.
What does the Constitution say? Those who want to gerrymander, go to Museveni at night, they agree the next day you have a sub-county into a constituency. You cannot run an election which is not based on clearly spelled out principles, and you think you'll have an election.
Thank you very much, Honorable Segona. Let me bring in Captain Babu finally. Captain, you have had dialogue, you've had selection and not election. How do we clean up this process so that we do not have a doomsday in the country?
Nimesikia kabisa, I've had completely. And this moot court of ours seems to be doing very well. Now let's get to the real thing. First of all, let me take this opportunity to ask the Electoral Commission of these people to change the boundaries of most of our electoral areas in Kampala, because we have too many people on each electoral area and we spend a whole day and people do not finish voting. And some other areas have got more electoral area than Kampala itself. So in these, what you people call ghetto, what we call slums, what we call congested area where you have densities, we are requesting the Electoral Commission to change those boundaries, please, so that people can vote within a reasonable time and go and do other things. That said and done, Madam, democracy, this democracy you have here, you have copied it. It's a capitalistic democracy. And therefore, when you hear that an American, somebody who has not even become a candidate has raised 200 million in 1 week, don't be surprised. It is a capitalistic democracy. And therefore, the rules are very clear. So when you go to commercialization of politics, you're really talking about what your democracy is. So let us now talk about what these people call commercial. It's not commercialization, it's corruption in election. Because your logistics, my friend was talking about posters being limited and all that, the logistics don't even count that. Count the money which is used to attract the change of mind. Count the money which is used to steal the vote. Count the money which pays those who change the vote at night. That's the money we're talking about. That's the corruption. That is the nuisance. So after we finished with that, I want us to be very careful that the corruption doesn't end there. It ends even after. They can actually keep counting the votes for 3 days. And the guy who lost it, who was number 3, in Kampala, in Uganda here, we've had somebody who was number 3, became number 1. Are you with me? Now, that is the reason why I'm saying this is corruption in fact, the word corruption is very bad. This is looting. You're looting the people, because the vote is not for the candidate, it's for the people. You're stealing their vote. So that's another point we've got to look at. Now, unfortunately, as long as you continue with this has become a game of gambling. We are gambling. So the guys who are very good at gambling in this competition seem to be getting away with it. And Socrates said many years ago, when the gamblers get into government, they will completely change the order of the day. So let us now also look at the different elite in this country. The elite give this thing a lip service. We've got to tell our people the truth. Somebody was earlier on saying, oh, if you don't give them money, if you don't do this, they will not listen to you. Tell them the truth and let them not vote you. Tell them the truth. Time has come to tell our voters in our constituencies that this is what it is. We as I'm going as a member of parliament, we do not make roads, we do not buy ambulances, we are not doctors, we are not nurses. I'm going to go there and talk to the different organizations that are in government to come and give us that service. That is your job. That's what we call, let me finish with this, it's very important. Somebody was talking about intelligence. United States has got a national intelligence agency. It's got 18 different agencies in it, starting from CIA all the way down up to the ones in the naval area. They collect information using all sorts of methods, and one of them is NGO. Leave it or take it, it's a fact. Now, that said and done, we go a little bit further and say, my brother here was saying, we want to have dialogue, we want to have, there's something called iPod. Some people say they cannot sit with Museveni. We're not going to iPod. iPod is an avenue where you can talk to each other as political parties. You have completely refused to go there. You're saying you don't want to sit with Museveni. And then you're asking earlier on, can Museveni come to a party organized by women like the lady did in... They will not invite him. They completely say anything to do with it. They don't want to hear. So you cannot have a dialogue with somebody you cannot, communicate to. I want to get this very clear. There are many methods of skinning a cat, they say. If you want to get into this problem and find it, you can use my brother's method, the Honorable Minister. You can use the method which other people are using. Next week we are coming for you. You can use the method of going to the bush, which is no longer fashion. You can use other methods. But I think the best method, no matter what you do, is when we can have a dialogue of one form or the other.
Okay. Thank you very much, Captain Babu. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to give each of you 2 minutes to give your parting shots. I'll start with Dr. Charity, Honorable Captain Francis Babu, finally the Honorable Ministers.
I will conclude with the words of Abraham Lincoln. Elections belong to the people. It's their decision. If they decide to turn their back on the fire and burn their behinds, they will just have to sit on their blisters. If you people are going to continue selling your vote, you will have the worst leaders in this country.
Wow, sitting on blisters. Charity, over to you.
So my parting shot is that the only one reform that Parliament should pass before 2026 is allow the young people who turn 18 to exercise their right to vote. 1.2 million Ugandans were barred from voting in 2016, in 2021. 2026, that number should be reduced substantially to allow citizens to participate in elections.
Thank you very much. Honorable Segona.
I can only say we did all that we were required to do as Parliament to ensure that everybody eligible to vote votes. Any failure on the part of government must not be blamed on us. Uganda belongs to us, and we must pay price in setting things right. If we do not do it, nobody will do it. And I must say, it's a contest. We will soldier on.
Thank you very much. Captain Francis Babu.
The leaders of this country, the whole political class, starting with the president, all the way down, must change their mindset on democracy, on election, on changing government. I think time has come for them to respect that particular thing, that if they want to run this democracy. Lastly, I want to say this. Please, let's find a solution. And we have many ways of doing it. And I want to, by the way, unlike other people, I'd like to ask the Honorable Minister who is here to go back on his points that he put forward and make sure that they understood, and that the President should come on board with you and tell us, the two of you should tell us what you decided, so that we can remove all this air of what people say. Thank you.
The dialogue.
There is a song that one of us is lying.
Honorable Minister.
That is ABBA. Fortunately, what we agreed upon is in black and white. Sometimes, even what is in black and white can be a subject of dispute, because people may have different interpretation. That's why people go to court when they have a written contract. I'm an optimist, and it is always risky to be an optimist. I have been in this position before. When we used to be in Parliament, we used to ask the government, please talk to the LRA. No way. We can't talk to terrorists. They are cutting off people's lips and so on. If you are telling us to talk to them, you must be their collaborators. We swallowed all that. But at the end of the day, the guns have been silenced. We have not got any medals, but here we are. We did our bit. Now, the cooperation agreement has been ridiculed by the likes of Segona as an employment contract. I don't mind. I am at least in a position where I can do certain things or try certain things and see whether they work or not. That's also okay. The majority of people know that it is safer to be a pessimist. It is actually very, very safe. If you're a pessimist, two things happen. Either you are proved right or you are pleasantly surprised. So when we finally went to Garamba and met Konya and talked to him and even hugged him, and we were not killed, those who are reaping the fruits, including saving the government of Uganda a lot of money in war expenses, were pleasantly surprised. But if we had failed, they would have been proved right. So being a pessimist is a way of having your cake and eating it, or eating your cake and having it, whichever way you want to look at it. And I want to announce here that in order to promote the spirit of talking about these things in a responsible manner, instead of just gaslighting, as they say, I have decided as Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs to ask the National Consultative Forum of Political Parties, which is a constitutional body, different from IPOD, which is a separate body. I've asked that body to sit. It brings together all the political parties. The future of Uganda is not a Mao Museveni affair, and you would really be selling yourself short to reduce it to that. The cooperation agreement was never about me. It was never about DP only or NRM. It was about setting an agenda and attempting what we call the third way. Between the extremists in the NRM who say Muzei Tovaku main, and then the extremists on the other side who say you must go whether you like it or not, so that we can build a broad center and let those ideas contend.
And the liberals who think, Mzee, in case of Udeku main, we have a standby generator.
Some of us have made our views known on that matter. We have told them that the standby generator is the Vice President of Uganda. It is in the Constitution. I hope you hear that they are not using the term a lot these days. Yeah, I think it is important for people to really, there's nothing to fear. Even if you are to lose your life, you have only one life, but lose it for a good cause, not recklessly. Even if you are to be punished, even if you are to be criticized, even if you are to be insulted, just make sure that whatever you are doing is in good conscience. I trust that it is the duty of all Ugandans to push the government of Uganda in the correct direction, instead of this delegitimization project. Because if you delegitimize your own government, I have never missed an opportunity to try to reach out to the government. Even after 2021 elections, I hadn't joined the government. I'm the one who picked the phone and told the president, can we meet and talk about those who have been arrested and imprisoned? And we met, and many were released. I've never been thanked. Instead, I'm being insulted.
Oh, please, can you ask them to release these young people they arrested the other day? I'll be very, very grateful, sir.
Thank you very much. Let me just recognize a few messages. John from Kasese, thank you very much. Muhindo Erabu, also from Kasese, thank you very much. Andrew from Kisoro, I also see. And finally, this is Asimu Julius again from Bara. And then, yes, those are the ones there. Dr. Sarah, thank you very much. Charity, thank you very much. Honorable Sekuna, thank you very much. Captain Francis Babu, thank you. Honorable Minister, thank you very much. To the team on the production, thank you very much. And we'll end it with this quote, a Kenyan proverb. The teeth that work together help each other to chew food. Good morning.
Yes, they are copying.
UBC, inspiring Uganda.
Mukoke Fish Farmers Association tuli balunzi ba byananda ebyebika ebisatu omuli Miracap, tilapia oba engege ni catfish twete male. Group eno twatandika twali abantu basatu nga tulingirira obwetaavu obwebyenanda obw'obwiva eno okubona nti tufuna okasente akava mu maadi agali gatambula butambule nga gatubita ku wanu ng'ekirabo. Twatandika ni fish pond ndala mu mwaka gw' 2018